Welcome to Wolfe Sanctuary. Orchids at 9, lunch at 1, murder in between. Tell us where you're listening from. The case starts now. Nero Wolfe and the Butler's Crimson Ledger. The rain had begun around 6, a steady, deliberate tapping against the windows that made the brownstone feel more fortress than home. I had just finished my second cup of coffee and was flipping through the Gazette when the bell rang. Not the side entrance, the front door. Fritz appeared from the kitchen archway, his face already grim. "I presume you are not expecting anyone," he said, with that precise Germanic rhythm that often meant disapproval. "Nope," I said, folding the paper neatly and standing. "And if it's a salesman, I'll make it quick. You've got my word." Fritz did not answer, but his glance toward the vestibule made his opinion plain. I opened the door. Standing under the protection of the stoop's overhang was a woman in a dove-grey coat, the collar drawn up to the cheek. Her gloves, damp with the mist, clutched a small dark handbag with knuckles pale from pressure. "Miss Vardell," I said, taking a guess based on instinct and the look in her eyes. Not startled, not angry, but urgent. "Yes," she said, stepping slightly closer. "Mr. Goodwin, I presume?" "You've got me," I said. "Do come in. That rain doesn't look like it's letting up." She stepped into the vestibule, cautious but composed. I closed the door behind her. Fritz's disapproval hovered in the air like an unspoken question. "Fritz," I said lightly, "I'll see to this one myself." Without responding, he turned and disappeared into the kitchen, doubtless to report the breach to Wolfe if he hadn't already. Miss Vardell stood still for a moment, as if gathering strength. She was in her early 30s, I guessed, with copper blonde hair pinned in place beneath a modest cloche. Her face was finely structured, but it was the eyes that held my attention, pale, green, and alert in a way that didn't match the softness of her voice. "I know this is unusual," she said, "but I didn't know where else to go." "Well," I said, "you've come to a place where unusual gets sorted daily. May I take your coat?" She hesitated, then nodded. I helped her out of it and hung it on the stand. The scent of rain and rosewater lingered as we moved into the front room. "Wolfe is in the plant rooms," I said. "He doesn't usually enjoy early disturbances, but I'll let him know you're here." "Please," she said. "It's important, urgent." I nodded and left her there, standing in the middle of the red guest chairs like a debutante dropped in the middle of a chessboard. Upstairs, Wolfe was perched near a tray of Miltonia orchids, his bulk pressed back into the stool we'd had reinforced last year. He didn't look up as I entered. "She's here," I said. "Name's Camilla Vardell. Says it's urgent. Her voice agrees." Wolfe frowned, not at the name, but at the disruption. "You've seen her?" "Yes," dripping wet and deeply concerned. "No appointment." He huffed. "Pfui. Bring her in, then." "But if this is about a missing necklace or marital indiscretion—" "She mentioned a ledger," I said. "Belonged to her father's butler. The butler's dead." Wolfe looked up at that. "Dead?" "Recently." He reached slowly for the cloth to wipe his hands. "Very well," he said. "Bring her." When I returned, Camilla was examining the books on the nearest shelf. She turned at my step, her hands now clasped together. I gestured. "This way, Miss Vardell." She followed me up the stairs and into the office. Wolfe was in his yellow chair, of course, the room warm and thick with the aroma of plant fertilizer and polish. He inclined his head, but did not rise. "Miss Vardell," he said, "you have intruded on my morning. That is not easily forgiven. Please sit." She sank into one of the red chairs, smoothing her skirt carefully. Her eyes met his with a practiced calm. "I apologize for the intrusion, Mr. Wolfe," she said, "but I did not know what else to do." "You might have written," he said. "There wasn't time," she said. "My name is Camilla Vardell. My father was the financier Edwin Vardell. He died last autumn. The man I wish to speak about was his butler, Reginald Colby." "I am aware of your father?" Wolfe said, not favourably. That didn't faze her. Reggie served our family for over 30 years, she said. He was more than a servant. He kept records. He was discreet, but not indifferent. He saw too much. Wolfe laced his fingers together and leaned back. You believe he was keeping a ledger? I know he was, and now it is missing. She nodded. And Reggie is dead. I leaned a little against the bookshelf. How recently? I asked. 3 days ago. Cerebral hemorrhage, they say. No warning, no signs. He collapsed in the garden. Natural causes are often the most convenient, Wolfe said dryly. Where was this? Our family home, Sutton Place. And the ledger? Gone. His room was searched. Quietly, but thoroughly. Wolfe arched a brow. By you? No, I noticed it was missing when I tried to retrieve it myself. He studied her for a moment. What precisely was in this ledger, Miss Vardell? She hesitated, then opened her handbag. From it, she withdrew a folded sheet of paper, a list, names, dates, figures. Reggie kept track of disbursements, payments, names of visitors. Some were anonymous, others less so. She passed the paper to me. I gave it a once-over. Several names I recognized. One belonged to a city councilman. The amounts weren't small. Wolfe said nothing for a moment. You have brought me an ethical problem, he said, and possibly a criminal one. She leaned forward. I'm not interested in scandal. I'm interested in the truth. Reggie was killed. I know it, and I believe someone. Wolfe shifted his weight in the chair, which creaked in mild protest. He reached for the silver box on his desk, retrieved a cigar, and lit it with deliberate precision. You will forgive my suspicion, he said, exhaling smoke in a slow ribbon. But when an heir of means arrives bearing partial evidence and an urgent tone, it often conceals a personal motive. You wish this ledger found. Is it because it may clear someone or implicate someone? Camilla didn't flinch. Both, she said. My uncle Raymond believes I am meddling. My half-brother Lionel accused me of trying to steal what was his. And yet neither of them reported Reggie's death to me. I learned of it from our housemaid. Wolfe nodded once, almost imperceptibly. And what of the estate? She hesitated. Still in probate, there were discrepancies. Father made large cash withdrawals in his final year. No one can account for them. The ledger might. Yes. Wolfe turned his eyes to me. Archie, when you're finished admiring her posture, make yourself useful. Obtain a certified copy of Reggie Colby's death certificate and contact Dr. Vollmer. I'll want a second opinion. Right, I said, pocketing the paper she had given me. Do I also drop by Sutton Place, or would that constitute criminal trespass? Camilla looked at me, then back at Wolfe. I'll make the introductions. I can manage Lionel and Raymond. For a time. Wolfe gave her a long, dispassionate glance. You are not the type to play helpless, he said. No, she replied, not even when it suits me. Good. I find competence less tedious. There was a beat of silence. The rain had lessened, now a murmur against the glass. Fritz's footsteps passed briefly in the hall beyond the door, but did not pause. Camilla Vardell rose. Will you take the case? Wolfe regarded her for a long moment. Then he shifted in his chair and closed his eyes. I abhor disorder, he murmured. A ledger lost, a man dead, funds unaccounted for. It tempts me. I coughed lightly. That's a yes. Wolfe's eyes opened. It is a willingness to inquire. Camilla gathered her coat. You'll hear from me before the day is out. Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. Mr. Goodwin. I escorted her to the vestibule. As I opened the door, the rain had become a fog, soft and clinging. She paused on the threshold. My brother, she said quietly, is not a patient man, nor is my uncle a forgiving one. Then don't give them cause, I said. And if you have the real ledger stashed away somewhere, now would be the time to hand it over. She didn't answer. Her eyes narrowed just slightly, and then she turned, descended the steps, and disappeared into the grey blur of Sutton Place mist. I closed the door, turned, and found Fritz in the hall behind me. "She should not have been admitted without an appointment," he said. "She wasn't admitted," I replied. "She broke through the weather." I returned to the office, where Wolfe was now inspecting the figures on Camilla's note under the magnifier. "You think she's hiding something?" I asked. Wolfe snorted softly. "Of course, everyone is. The question is whether she is hiding guilt or fear." I nodded. "What's my next move?" "Get the facts," he said. "The ledger, the death, the people. She has set a board, Mr. Goodwin. Now let us see which piece she plans to move next." He leaned back, puffing slowly on the cigar. The room fell quiet, save for the clock ticking beneath the shelf of reference volumes. Outside, the rain began again, not harder, just with more certainty. Inside, the pieces had begun to shift. Camilla Vardell sat composed in the red chair, her gloves resting neatly in her lap. The storm outside had not abated. The rain slid in ribbons down the window panes, casting a grey tint across the room's mahogany tones. Wolfe had returned to his chair with the posture of a monarch interrupted. I leaned against the corner of my desk, notebook in hand. Wolfe tapped ash gently into the bronze tray, then fixed his gaze upon her. "Miss Vardell," he said, "continue." She inclined her head slightly, as if receiving permission in a courtroom. "Reggie Colby was not simply our butler. He managed the estate, our schedules, even our doctor's appointments in the final years of my father's life. My father trusted him more than any of us." "That is not an enviable arrangement," Wolfe said. "A servant made indispensable often becomes inconvenient." She didn't respond immediately. Reggie had a habit, no, a compulsion, to write things down, receipts, guests, even remarks overheard in passing. "And you believe he catalogued something incriminating?" "I believe," she said, folding her fingers together, "that he kept a ledger detailing payments my father made, off the books." "What sort of payments?" "I don't know all of them, but I believe some were hush money." "Who received them?" She looked toward the window, not for answers, but composure. "I found a list once. Several years ago, I was visiting from college. A scrap of paper in Reggie's handwriting. It had names I didn't recognize and cash amounts beside each one. He saw me holding it and took it back, politely, but firmly. I asked questions. He said nothing. I scribbled that down, though I already knew Wolfe had stored it in the vault between his ears. Wolfe grunted. "That was years ago. Why now?" "Because he's dead, and the ledger's gone." "Did you see the ledger yourself?" "No, but I know he kept one. It was his habit. Every evening after dinner he would go into the pantry office and write. The drawer was locked. My father permitted it." "Did your father discuss it?" "Only once. He said, 'Reggie's file is better than any safe I own.'" Wolfe shifted, set the cigar in its cradle, and pressed his fingertips together. "You suspect murder?" "I do. What evidence do you offer?" She hesitated. 3 days ago, Reggie was found in the back garden, face down. The housekeeper said she thought he had gone out to check the bins. He never came back in." "Who else was present?" "My brother Lionel, my uncle Raymond, 2 house staff." Wolfe frowned. "Was a doctor summoned?" "Yes, Dr. Connors. He signed the death as a natural cerebral hemorrhage." "Was there an autopsy?" "No." "Why not?" "My uncle called the coroner and insisted there was no need. He has some influence in the district." Wolfe's lip twitched. "Of course he does." She leaned forward slightly. "I wanted the death investigated. Lionel refused. He called me paranoid, said I was looking for ghosts." "And are you?" I asked. She met my eyes directly. "No, I'm looking for the truth." The office was quiet a moment. Even the rain held its breath. Wolfe sighed. "Mr. Goodwin, Please retrieve the file, marked Household Staff, New York, from drawer 4. I did. Wolfe opened it with one hand, glanced over a page, and then looked back at her. "Camilla," he said. "May I call you that?" "You may." "You are convinced the ledger contained dangerous information?" "Yes." "Then if it still exists, someone is already trying to find it. That makes your presence here—" He paused, bold, possibly reckless. She gave a faint smile. "Then I came to the right place." Wolfe grunted again. "Archie," he said, "make arrangements. We begin immediately." I made the necessary marks in my book, then turned to Wolfe. "Where shall I begin?" He exhaled slowly. "The house, of course. Speak with the staff. Walk the ground where Reggie fell. Confirm his death and, more importantly, the atmosphere surrounding it." Camilla watched this with quiet interest. "You'll speak with Lionel?" "If he permits," I said, "and if not, I'll speak anyway." She reached into her handbag and produced a calling card. "Give this to the doorman. He'll send you up." I took the card. It had the same floral watermark as the note she'd handed over earlier. Discreet, but expensive. Wolfe steepled his fingers. "Miss Vardell, this house is not a revolving door. If you have further details, send them in writing. Archie may contact you for clarification."
She nodded and stood. "I understand."
Wolfe's gaze narrowed. "If you are withholding anything—" "I'm not."
He inclined his head by a degree. "Good. Fritz will show you out."
I escorted her to the hall instead. Fritz was already waiting, immaculate as always, but with a jaw set like carved granite. She paused before the door. "Thank you, Mr. Goodwin." "I haven't done anything yet." "You came to the door."
"That I do regularly."
Her smile was faint, but not without warmth. She departed into the misty street, her figure swallowed by the grey. I closed the door and returned to the office. Wolfe hadn't moved. "She's playing a game," he said without looking up. "A dangerous one." "Potentially." I crossed to the desk. "You believe her about the ledger?" "I believe she believes it." "And the payments?" Wolfe reached for his cigar. "That interests me more. A man of Edwin Vardell's stature making off-the-books disbursements, likely cash. That suggests vice or leverage." "Blackmail?" Wolfe shrugged. "Or charity wrapped in secrecy. Either would scandalize a legacy family."
I flipped my notebook closed. "You really think Reggie Colby was killed?"
"I think his death was timely and unexamined. That is always worth investigating."
I pocketed the card. "Then I'll start with Sutton Place."
Wolfe closed his eyes. "You'll take the car, avoid police entanglements, and Archie—"
"Yes?"
"Do not underestimate the girl. A woman who knows when to lie is dangerous, but a woman who lies well—" He trailed off, letting the smoke finish the thought. I left him to his orchids and made for the coat rack. Outside, the rain had quieted, but the air still held its breath. The game had begun. And somewhere in Sutton Place, a dead man's secrets were waiting to be found. The Vardell house stood on Sutton Place like a dowager clinging to reputation, tall, stone-faced, and newly haunted. A scaffold climbed the south wall, half shrouded in tarpaulin, where masons had stripped the facade. Strips of yellow tape flapped lazily in the drizzle. At the front door, a marble stoop cracked down one side like an old tooth. I pressed the brass bell once. A distant chime rang. The man who opened the door wore a dark waistcoat and a look of judgment. I handed him Camilla's card without a word. He inspected it, turned, and gestured me inside. The interior was colder than expected. Dust hung in the air, stirred by the thrum of distant sanding. Furniture had been sheeted, corners stacked with crates and toolboxes. I stood on a Persian runner faded nearly to grey. "Wait here," the man said. Then he vanished into the house like a minor ghost. A few minutes passed. Then the footsteps returned, louder, sharper. Lionel Vardell entered with his shoulders square and his eyes half-lidded with disdain. He looked about 35, tall, with black hair combed precisely and a suit that had seen better days. "You're the detective," he said flatly. "I'm Archie Goodwin. I'm employed by Nero Wolfe." "That's worse," I smiled. "I've heard."
He motioned toward the rear hallway. "We'll talk in the study, but keep it brief."
The study hadn't fared well in the renovation. Bookshelves stood half empty, and the plaster above the mantel had been opened for wiring. Still, the desk was polished, and the two wing-back chairs in front of it were untouched. I sat. He did not. "What's your angle?" he asked. "My angle," I said, "is a dead butler and a missing book." He folded his arms. "Reggie died of natural causes. And the ledger? There's no ledger." "That's not what your sister believes." He scoffed. "Camilla reads too many novels. She thinks the world's full of hidden villains and noble truths." "You don't?"
"I think people die and greedy relatives look for reasons."
I leaned forward slightly. "You didn't report Reggie's death for over 12 hours. He flinched. Not much, but enough. "We didn't think it was suspicious." "Even though he was found in the garden face down, mid-morning, with no coat." "I wasn't here." "Where were you?" He hesitated. "With a friend." "Name?" He turned toward the bookshelf, touched a volume with deliberate indifference. "Is this what you people do? Ask questions until someone gets tired?" "That's the hope."
Before he could answer, another voice floated in.
"That's enough, Lionel!" A second man entered the study, older, heavier around the waist, but with a distinguished posture. His grey hair was slicked back. His cravat had been tied with studied elegance. "Uncle Raymond," Lionel said without warmth. Raymond offered a hand. "You must be Mr. Goodwin." I shook it. "That's right. Camilla mentioned you. I trust your employer is well." "He's upright and breathing. For Wolfe, that's peak condition." Raymond chuckled politely. "Well, we're in a state of disarray here, as you can see, but I'll help where I can." "Much appreciated," I said. "I suppose you want to see where Reggie fell?" "That would help."
Raymond gestured toward the back of the house. "This way."
We passed through a panelled corridor and out a rear door into the garden. The flagstones were still damp. At the far end, a low brick wall separated the yard from an alleyway. "He was found just there," Raymond said, pointing near a stone planter. "Who found him?" "The housemaid, Tilda. Poor girl was shaken." I crouched and studied the area. No chalk, no markers. Just moss and a faint trail in the dirt, as if something or someone had been dragged or collapsed. "Did anyone hear anything?" "No," Raymond said. "We assumed it had been swift. The doctor agreed." I stood. "May I see Reggie's quarters?" Raymond hesitated. "I don't see the harm." Reggie Colby's quarters were tucked behind the kitchen, down a narrow hall with creaking boards and a low ceiling. The door was simple oak, unadorned. Raymond stepped aside. "We haven't touched anything, out of respect."
I entered first. The room was small but neat. A single bed, a writing desk, and a wardrobe. No personal photos, no clutter.
I scanned the desk first. The top drawer opened easily. Empty. The second stuck slightly. When it gave way, I noticed a faint brown stain in the rear left corner. Not ink, something darker.
I leaned in. The stain had soaked into the wood grain, just enough to be visible if you knew to look.
Raymond, peering in from the threshold, cleared his throat. "Is something wrong?" "Just wondering," I said, "how much cleaning a house gets when it's under renovation." He didn't answer. I stepped back and opened the wardrobe. 3 suits, 2 pairs of shoes, a hat with a crisp brim. No ledger. The mattress was firm. I checked beneath it. Nothing. Raymond shifted uncomfortably. "Reggie was a creature of habit. This was his domain." I nodded. "And you respected him?" "More than most." "And your nephew?" His face tightened. "Lionel has strong opinions, not always well informed." "Did Lionel and Reggie get along?"
They tolerated each other.
I turned back to the desk. Did Reggie have any reason to be afraid? Raymond blinked. Afraid? Of what? I'm not sure yet. At that moment, a soft knock sounded at the half-open door. A woman in a blue apron stood in the corridor. Her hands were wringing a dish towel, though they were dry. "Tilda?" I asked. She gave a faint nod. Miss Vardell said, "If I ever felt uneasy, I might speak to you." Raymond started to object, but I raised a hand. "Alone," I said. He hesitated, then retreated. Tilda entered, closed the door behind her. "I shouldn't talk long," she whispered. "He watches." "Who? Lionel? What do you know, Tilda?" She glanced around, then leaned closer.
"Mr. Colby, he knew something. I think someone threatened him." "When?" "A week before he died. He stopped sleeping, wouldn't take his evening walk. He kept the door locked. He told me if anything ever happened to him, there was a drawer to check." I turned back to the desk. "Which one?"
She pointed to the second drawer, the one with the stain. I pulled it out again, nothing beneath, but the bottom panel felt uneven. I tapped, hollow. Carefully I slid my fingers under the false base and lifted it free. Inside was a narrow envelope, brown paper, no markings. I unfolded it. A single key and a note. Tilda gasped. "I never saw that before." The note read, "If I go, it wasn't chance. Tell her to follow the names. Start with HR. No signature. Just the initials RC in small, deliberate hand." I folded it carefully and slid it into my pocket. "Tilda," I said, "forget you ever saw that drawer."
She nodded, eyes wide. I opened the door. Raymond stood just down the corridor.
"Thank you," I said. "I think I've seen enough." He raised an eyebrow. "Did you find anything?" "Just dust," I said, "but some dust is older than others." He didn't press it. By the time I left the house, the rain had stopped. The sky was still leaden, but lighter. A thin wind brushed the sidewalk clean. Back at the car, I checked the envelope again. The key was unmarked, but old. Probably a safety box, maybe a storage trunk. The initials on the note stayed with me. HR and Reggie Colby's warning. Wolfe wasn't going to like this, but he would be interested. Very interested.
The rain had eased, but the streets still wore their wet sheen like a memory that wouldn't fade. I crossed Lexington with my collar turned up and my thoughts turned inward. Reggie Colby hadn't spoken in 3 days. Not a whisper, not a confession, and yet something told me he still had something to say. The office of Dr. Albert Minch was wedged between a bakery and a barber shop, its window painted with simple black letters. Minch and CO, Mortuary Services. Underneath, in smaller type, respectful, reserved, reliable.
Inside, the air was cold and floral. The receptionist, a woman with lipstick like dried rose petals, pointed me toward a side corridor. I found Dr. Minch arranging paperwork behind a high desk. He was pale, prim, and powdered, as though he slept among the product. I showed him my card. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, squinting through gold-rimmed spectacles. "Yes, you're calling about Mr. Colby." "That's right." He gestured toward a modest office. "We can speak there?" It smelled faintly of carnations. He folded his hands. "A quiet man, I believe. He worked for the Vardell family for decades." "So I'm told. You signed off on the death certificate?"
I did. Cerebral hemorrhage.
He nodded. "Rapid onset, no signs of trauma, no bruising, no contusions, no blood from the nose or ears, just collapsed on the walk." "Was there a post-mortem?" "No," the family declined. "Did you recommend one?"
He hesitated. "Let's say I raised the possibility. Mr. Raymond Vardell was firm. He preferred discretion."
"Did anything seem off?" He pressed his lips together, thinking. "I've seen hemorrhages before. They don't all look the same." But Mr. Colby's expression gave me pause. "Explain." "It was wary, as if he'd seen something he feared right before the end." I let that sit a moment.
"Did you examine his belongings?"
"Yes, wallet, watch, a pair of keys, one house, one unknown, a folded matchbook barely used." Where are they? He opened a drawer behind him and removed a clear envelope. They've been held in case of next of kin inquiry.
I took it gently.
Inside were 3 items: a plain key, square cut, unmarked, a house key with a brass collar, and the matchbook.
The logo on the cover read, "The Marigold Club, a quiet mid-town place, if I remembered right. Piano bar, drinks served in crystal."
The inside flap had 1 scratch. No notes, no numbers. I nodded. Thanks, Doctor. One thing more, he said, rising. In cases like this, when death arrives too neatly, it's usually because someone wanted the silence to be permanent. I slipped the envelope into my coat. Reggie Colby was a butler, I said. It was his job to keep things quiet. Back at the brownstone, the lamps were lit early. The sky had gone from ash to pewter, and the clouds looked heavy with promises they meant to keep. Fritz let me in with his usual expression, polished courtesy, with a teaspoon of disdain. He vanished toward the kitchen before I could comment. Wolfe was in his chair, a book closed on his lap. He didn't look up. Well, he said. I dropped my coat over the arm of the red chair and set the envelope on his desk. No autopsy, death was ruled. A cerebral hemorrhage.
Wolfe snorted. Convenient.
Very. He leaned forward and opened the envelope with 1 finger. The keys clinked on the desk's glass surface. 2 keys, he said. 1 to the Vardell house, the other. Unlabeled, doesn't match any household type I've seen. He turned it over. Not cut for Yale, no residential tag, narrow shaft, tight grooves.
I handed him the matchbook. This was in his coat, Midtown Lounge, the Marigold Club.
Wolfe read the name aloud with distaste. A den of mediocrity. You've been? I have been told of it. Red velvet booths, gin, crooners. He examined the inside flap. Unused, an emblem, nothing more, yet he kept it. Meaning? Possibly nostalgia, possibly fear. He gestured. The key? I sat. I think it's a bank box.
Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Why? Too plain for luggage, too small for luggage storage, and the shaft's too short for a safe.
Agreed, Wolfe said. And morticians do not typically inventory apartment keys without labels. It's distinctive enough to have made him curious. I nodded. And Reggie had it on him, not hidden. Which means he kept it close. Either he needed access, or he feared it would be taken. I watched him roll the key between thumb and forefinger, his brow furrowing slightly. There are banks within a 12-block radius of the Marigold Club, I said. I can try them all.
Wolfe waved a hand. No, begin with the club. Discreet inquiries. Who knew him? Who watched him? Who followed?
Understood. He placed the key down with precision. Then he tapped the edge of the envelope once, twice. No ledger among the effects? No. Then it is elsewhere, and someone is likely looking for it. I nodded. That narrows the list. Not enough, Wolfe said. We must find it before they do. I rose and retrieved my coat.
He looked up again.
Archie. Yes?
Have Fritz prepare lunch early. I detest the taste of secrecy on an empty stomach. The Midtown sun came out just long enough to make the sidewalks steam. I stepped off the curb near 48th and Lex, dodged a delivery truck, and moved toward the entrance of Merchants Continental Bank, a limestone affair with a brass-trimmed doorway and marble lions flanking the steps.
Inside, the lobby was cool, quiet, and flush with polished surfaces. A uniformed clerk glanced up from behind the glass. I approached and slid my card across the marble counter. Archie Goodwin, I'm here to check a private deposit box. I believe you'll find it under the name of Reggie Colby. The clerk, a lean fellow with nervous eyes, adjusted his cuffs. 1 moment, please. He vanished through a swinging door and returned after several minutes with a manager in tow. The manager was soft around the middle and smelled faintly of camphor. I'm Mr. Greaves. You're representing the Colby estate. I nodded. Discreetly, I have the key. I showed it without setting it down.
He inspected it from across the counter. Box 413, this way.
He led me down a corridor panelled in walnut and fitted with sconces shaped like torches. At the end was a steel-reinforced vault door. Beyond it, rows of small drawers lined both walls. The air was dry and smelled of old paper and polished brass. Greaves gestured. "I'll leave you in privacy. The box will slide out on the rail." He unlocked a section with his master key. I inserted mine. With a faint click, the drawer released and extended. Inside was a single item, a leather-bound book, no thicker than a ledger, its spine embossed with a gold monogram. E.V. The leather was crimson, deep, almost black in dim light. I removed it carefully, set it on the small table, and opened to the first page. No title, just a date, January 11th, 1935. The entries that followed weren't diary-like, no sentences, no prose, just columns, dates, initials, dollar figures, notations in Reggie's tight, right-leaning script. I flipped slowly. Each page told a story in fragments, names I half recognized, payments that ranged from $50,000 to $15,000. One name appeared 4 times, CL. Another showed a strange pattern. FS received identical payments every third Tuesday for 5 months, then nothing. A week later, a new initial appeared, ML, receiving double the previous amounts. 2/3 through the book, I stopped. One entry had been underlined in red pencil, HR, $3,000, last payment. No date followed. No subsequent entry was made for over a week. I made a note of the position. Then I closed the ledger, placed it back in the box, and locked it again. Outside the vault, Greaves waited with a thin smile. "Nothing unusual?" he asked. "Only the handwriting," I said. "Terrible stuff."
He blinked, unsure whether I was joking.
I thanked him and left. Back on the street, I hailed a cab and gave the Brownstones' address. When I arrived, Fritz was tending to a tray of boiled eggs and watercress. I didn't wait. I pushed into the office, ledger in hand. Wolfe looked up, set aside his book, and leaned back in the yellow chair. "Well?" I placed the ledger before him and opened to the underlined entry. HR, last payment, I said. 3,000. He raised one eyebrow. "You're certain this was Colby's?" His handwriting, bank confirmed. Wolfe studied the page, then turned back 5, then 10 pages. His fingers moved with care, like touching evidence at a crime scene. "It is not just a ledger," he said. "No, it's a story, one told in numbers and silence."
He closed the book and looked at me.
"Whoever HR is, they were being paid regularly, and then they weren't." I nodded. "And Reggie died within days."
Wolfe pressed his fingers together. "And so we arrive at motive."
I took the red chair opposite him as he opened the ledger once more, turning pages like a man reading through a coded confession. "No names spelled out," I said, "just initials, but some repeat."
He nodded. "That makes them more useful, not less."
He tapped one page. "Look here. EH appears across 5 months. Payments escalate, then vanish. Same pattern with CL. Indeed, Colby must have been documenting transactions too delicate for open books. Bribes."
"Possibly. Hush money, payments for silence, or insurance."
I stood and crossed to the desk. HR could be anyone, a housemaid, a rival, a mistress, or a killer. He closed the book with finality. "You will investigate these initials quietly. And if HR turns up?" He looked at me unblinking. "Use caution. People who stop being paid tend to make noise. But someone ensured Reggie stayed silent." I picked up the ledger and returned it to the safe drawer behind his chair. Wolfe waited until I locked it. "Anything else in the bank box?" "Nothing. No letters, just the book." He nodded. "Then it was placed there for its own protection, or to be found by the right eyes." I paused. "Which one are we?" His mouth curled faintly. "That remains to be seen." I sat again. "You think Camilla knew?" "No. She believed it existed, but I suspect she never saw it. She'll want to." She must not yet. There was a knock at the office door. Fritz stepped in with a note on a silver tray. I took it, unfolded it. "From Camilla," I said. "She requests an urgent meeting this evening." Wolfe closed his eyes. "She's nervous. She should be." He gestured.
"You will see her, gauge her tone, but do not share the ledger, not until we know who HR is." I pocketed the note. What if she's HR?
Wolfe exhaled slowly. "Then we are far closer to the end than we know."
I left him there, deep in thought, the lamplight glinting on the edge of the cigar tray and the gold lettering on the locked drawer.
Outside, the light was fading. Inside, the truth was sharpening. By the time I left the bank, night had folded itself neatly over Manhattan. The sidewalks were slick from earlier drizzle, catching glints from the gaslight-coloured bulbs strung along Lexington Avenue. I'd kept the oilskin-wrapped ledger tucked flat against my chest beneath my coat, not because I was expecting trouble, but because I always did.
It was just past 7 when I stepped onto the curb. The doorman gave a polite nod as I passed. A pair of cabbies argued over a fare at the corner. Steam billowed from a manhole near 50th. All normal.
Except one thing wasn't. I caught the reflection in a storefront window. A man 2 steps behind me, maintaining pace. Grey hat, trench coat, hands deep in his pockets. I passed a pharmacy and ducked left at the corner deli. So did he. I paused to light a cigarette using the brass sconce above a locked doorway. He did the same, or pretended to. It was too perfect, too studied. I crossed the street diagonally at 51st, weaving through light traffic. The man adjusted. He followed. I didn't rush. That would have given him rhythm to work with. Instead, I slowed, let him close the distance just enough to confirm it wasn't coincidence. Then I turned down an alley behind a shuttered tailor. Halfway in, I heard his steps quicken.
I spun just as he reached me. He lunged without a word, going for my coat. I stepped sideways and drove a fist into his gut, enough to bend him. He was fast, but not fast enough. I caught his wrist, twisted, and shoved him into the wall. The edge of a trash can clanged as his shoulder hit steel. Still, he didn't speak.
He jabbed toward my chest, fingers searching for the oilskin parcel. I ducked, slammed his hand away, and stepped back. He wasn't armed, at least not visibly. That made him a retriever, not a killer. He wanted the ledger, not blood.
I didn't wait for a second attempt. I turned, gripped the bundle tighter under my coat, and slipped out of the alley into the street. My breath came short, but my pace stayed even. I didn't run, I just disappeared into a crowd of commuters heading toward the subway.
A few blocks down, I found a cab idling near a diner and slid in. "West 35th, I said. "And don't dawdle."
The driver nodded, lit a cigarette of his own, and pulled away.
From the rear window, I scanned both sides of the street. No hat, no trench coat, no second act.
We rolled south. My hands didn't stop clenching. 10 minutes later, I stepped out in front of the brownstone. The lights were on in the upper windows. I mounted the steps 2 at a time and knocked once, short and firm.
Fritz answered, immaculate as always, apron folded at his waist. "You are late," he said. "Tell me something I don't know." He opened the door. I stepped inside and shrugged off my coat. "You're bleeding," he noted, eyeing my sleeve.
I glanced down. The cuff had torn, a scrape from the alley wall, nothing surgical.
"Don't worry," I said. "It's not arterial." He pursed his lips and vanished toward the kitchen, muttering something about Americans and alleyways. I walked into the office.
Wolfe was in his yellow chair, hands tented, staring at the ceiling as if waiting for the stars to offer him a footnote.
He looked up as I entered. "Well?" "I had a dance partner. Short number, no music." "Describe."
Medium height, wide chest, silent type, went for the ledger, came up empty.
"You're certain he followed you from the bank?" "I am." Wolfe closed his eyes. "Then the scent of desperation is no longer faint." I stepped forward and placed the parcel on his desk. "Still intact," I said. He opened it carefully, confirming the crimson leather remained unscathed. Then he stood, walked to the wall safe behind the far panel, and turned the dial. The clicks echoed softly. He opened the door, placed the ledger inside, and spun the wheel closed again. The silence that followed was a shade heavier than usual. Wolfe turned back to his chair and lowered himself into it, adjusting the creases in his vest. He reached for the bell and rang once. Fritz entered immediately. "Beer," Wolfe said.
Fritz disappeared. I sank into the red chair, rubbing the back of my neck.
"He wasn't armed," I said. "Then he was meant to extract, not eliminate." "Meaning what?" "Meaning someone believed you would carry the ledger openly or foolishly, which makes them either lucky or sloppy." Fritz returned, placed the chilled glass on Wolfe's tray and withdrew. Wolfe took one long sip and sighed. "We are not yet at the heart of this," he said. "We are circling it." The phone rang. I crossed the room and answered. "Brownstone, Goodwin." A pause, then Camilla's voice, quiet but not soft. "Archie?" "Yes." "Is he there?" "He is." "Put me through." I handed Wolfe the receiver.
He pressed it to his ear with a motion like hoisting a loaded revolver.
"Miss Vardell?" A pause, his eyes shifted, unreadable. "Yes, speak plainly." Another silence, then his lips tightened. "When?" A nod. "Who found him?" His voice didn't rise. It flattened. "No. Do not speak to anyone else until Kramer arrives." He listened again, then lowered the receiver slowly and hung up. "She's at the Vardell house," he said. "Something wrong?"
"Yes."
"Lionel? Dead?" I sat forward. "How?"
"Bourbon poisoned." "When?" "Less than an hour ago." My mind clicked into gear. "She was there?" She was. So was Raymond. And the staff.
"And now Kramer's on his way."
Wolfe leaned back and touched his temples lightly, as if warding off an unwanted vision.
"This is no longer a game of pressure, it is a pattern of removal. First Colby, now Lionel." I rose and crossed the room. "You think Camilla's next?" He didn't answer immediately. "No," he said at last. "Not yet." I opened the blinds and looked out into the street. The fog had crept back, slow and deliberate. "They wanted the ledger tonight," I said, "and when they failed—" "They improvised," Wolfe finished. "Too fast?" "Much too fast." He closed his eyes.
"The man who followed you was a hired hand. The poisoner was something else, someone closer."
I nodded. "I'll speak to Kramer in the morning. You'll need tact." "I have pockets full of it." He waved a hand. "Not now. Tomorrow."
The clock on the mantel ticked once. Then again.
We sat in silence while the city drew its breath. The next move belonged to the killer. Wolfe remained in his chair, arms crossed loosely, eyes half-lidded, but far from relaxed. I paced. "She sounded shaken," I said. "She should be," Wolfe replied. "Whether from guilt or fear remains to be seen. She didn't ask for help. She didn't need to. She knew I'd understand what Lionel's death means, which is that someone is losing control." I stopped in front of the desk. Lionel wasn't exactly beloved, but killing him now, it's not strategy, it's panic. Wolfe gave a slight nod. "And that is when mistakes occur, but also violence." The phone rang again. This time I answered without hesitation. "Brownstone." A gruff voice, familiar. "Goodwin, it's Kramer." "Evening, Inspector." "Wolfe there?"
"He is."
"Put him on." Wolfe extended his hand for the receiver, took it, and settled the cord across his stomach, like a judge draping his robe. "Kramer." He didn't blink as the voice on the other end barked. I could only hear half of it, but it was clear Kramer wasn't calling for polite company. "Yes, I'm aware," Wolfe said flatly.
"No, I have not seen the body."
"No, I have not seen the bottle." A pause.
"You suspect the sister?"
A longer pause. No, you suspect her because she is poised. Another pause. Wolfe's tone remained quiet. Inspector, you forget I have no obligation to share everything I know. Yes, she came to me. No, I did not encourage her to conceal anything. He shifted slightly in the chair. Yes, I have something. No, you may not have it. Not yet. Kramer clearly didn't like that. Wolfe waited, then delivered the sentence like a closing argument. When I'm ready, I will invite you. Not before. He handed the phone back to me without another word. Good night, Inspector, I said, and hung up. He's coming apart, I said. He's being cornered, Wolfe replied. He knows this wasn't suicide, but motive eludes him. And we're the ones holding the puzzle piece.
Not yet, but we are holding the box.
He reached for the bell and rang twice. Fritz entered a moment later. You will prepare the red bedroom, Wolfe said. Fritz blinked. For Miss Vardell, Wolfe clarified. She's coming here? I asked. She will need a place tonight. I suspect she'll arrive within the hour. Fritz inclined his head and disappeared. She didn't ask to come. She won't have a choice, Wolfe said. And what about Raymond? Camilla must be protected. The uncle may already be planning her obituary. I sat down again. You really think Raymond's the one? Wolfe didn't answer directly. He had access, he had knowledge, he had motive, but above all, he had urgency. I looked toward the safe. If he knew what was in the ledger— He doesn't, Wolfe said. If he did, he wouldn't have hired a thug. He would have used fire. I frowned.
Then who does know?
Wolfe touched his fingertips together. Only Colby. And now us. Which makes us next. We sat like that for a minute. The street outside was quiet. A car passed, slowly. Headlights crawled along the wall and disappeared. A knock came at the front door. Fritz answered it. A moment later, Camilla stepped into the office, her coat still damp from the fog, eyes rimmed red, but no tears on her cheeks. Mr. Wolfe, she said. He inclined his head. Miss Vardell. She sat in the red chair, setting her gloves on her lap. I didn't want to come, she said.
I didn't expect you to.
But you knew I would? Yes. A pause. Lionel is dead, she said, as if the statement had to be confirmed aloud. I know. They think I did it. They're wrong.
Her eyes met his. You sound sure.
I am. She looked away. I hated him, she whispered, but I didn't kill him.
Hate is not motive, Wolfe said. Hate is colour. Motive is pressure.
She said nothing. You were present? Yes. Who poured the drink? He did. Who handed him the glass?
I don't know. I wasn't watching. You were speaking with whom? Tilda, in the foyer.
Wolfe nodded slowly. What did Lionel say before he died? Nothing. He was laughing at something my uncle said. Then he coughed. Then he fell. Was Raymond alarmed? No. Was he the first to speak? Yes. What did he say? He said, "Get her out of the room." Wolfe opened his eyes slightly.
Not get help, not call a doctor. Camilla didn't respond. Wolfe leaned forward.
Miss Vardell, I have something that belongs to your father's estate. It may explain what's happening, but not yet. I must be certain. She stood. I don't care what's in it anymore. You will.
She turned toward the hallway.
Fritz has prepared a room, Wolfe said.
I won't sleep. You will rest, and you will be safe.
She didn't answer, just left the room quietly, her heels soft against the carpet. Wolfe waited until the door closed behind her. Then he turned to me. You will sleep downstairs, he said, in the front room, armed. Yes, sir. And you will not leave the house, not until I say. Understood. He closed his eyes again.
Tomorrow, we begin to unravel the initials.
I nodded. And HR? Wolfe's voice dropped to a murmur. Whoever they are, they have killed once, and failed once. I locked the front door, checked the windows, turned off the office light. The safe stayed locked, and the storm outside waited, patient as a predator. At 9:15 sharp, the brass knocker on the front door struck with the kind of force that didn't ask permission. It demanded an audience. I was already in the office, flipping through yesterday's notes, when Fritz stepped in and offered one word with a glare. Kramer. Wolfe didn't look up from his chair. Show him in. Fritz vanished. The front door opened. Footsteps thundered across the hallway like an invasion. Inspector Kramer entered the office without pause. His hat was still on. His overcoat flared behind him like a cape of smoke. And he was already red in the face.
Wolfe, he barked. I've had enough of this.
Wolfe did not stir. Good morning, Inspector, he said mildly. Kramer tossed his hat at the coat rack and missed. It fell to the floor. Lionel Vardell is dead, strychnine in his bourbon. You know how long that takes to kill a man? 20 seconds. You know how long he lasted? 4. Wolfe raised a brow. You were there with a stopwatch? Don't be smart.
Kramer paced to the fireplace and back.
He was poisoned, Wolfe, and I've got a household full of suspects. I want answers. Then ask your suspects. I'm asking you. Wolfe steepled his fingers. I did not poison Lionel Vardell. You've been sitting on something, I can smell it. I cleared my throat from my chair. It might be my aftershave. Shut up, Goodwin.
I shut up.
Kramer turned to Wolfe again. You knew something before that man hit the carpet. You knew something before Colby died too. You've been poking around without sharing a thing. Wolfe sighed. I have not impeded your investigation. You've tiptoed around it like a cat on a mantle. Do you have a warrant? No. Then sit down. Kramer stood there for a moment, breathing hard. Then he dropped into the red chair and leaned forward, elbows on knees. Are you going to hand it over? Wolfe nodded once. Yes. He rose from the chair, crossed to the safe, and spun the dial. I watched Kramer's eyes narrow. The steel door opened. Wolfe reached inside, pulled out the crimson ledger, and laid it flat on the desk. Kramer stared. What is that? Wolfe tapped the cover. A record, maintained by Reginald Colby over the past 10 years. Payments, visits, names, abbreviated but legible with thought. Kramer opened to the center. His expression shifted, a mix of awe and nausea. Is this what I think it is? Yes.
Who the hell is HR?
We don't yet know. Kramer flipped through pages like a man looking for a noose. Colby was keeping records. Yes. And someone didn't like it. 2 people are dead. Kramer closed the book. I'm taking this. I expected you to. You're not stopping me. Wolfe returned to his chair.
No, because I've already read it.
Kramer stood.
Anything else?
Yes. Wolfe met his gaze. There will be more deaths if you mishandle this. Kramer didn't sit again. He stood there, clutching the crimson ledger like a Bible that burned at the touch. He glanced at Wolfe once, then at me, then back at Wolfe. What do you mean, more deaths? Wolfe adjusted in his chair, calm, deliberate, immovable. I mean that whoever poisoned Lionel has not finished. They are acting quickly, sloppily. That's dangerous.
Kramer's lip curled. You have names? I have initials.
That's not enough.
It's a start.
Kramer moved to the window. The fog was heavy. pressing close against the panes like a silent witness. "I've got a house full of suspects," he muttered. "A maid who's half shaking, a dead butler, a sister who looks like she's seen the end of the world, and a corpse who drank his bourbon smiling." He turned back to Wolfe. "You think it was Raymond?" "I think Raymond had motive, proximity and arrogance, but not precision." "So, not him?" "I didn't say that." Kramer walked to the fireplace and leaned on the mantel. The flame had been set earlier that morning. It hissed quietly, flickering against the brass grate. "I need more than hunches," he said. Wolfe nodded. "Then you must move fast, but not blindly." Kramer tapped the ledger with his knuckle. "You expect me to decode this? I expect you to guard it and keep it from being destroyed." "Destroyed?" Wolfe leaned forward, his tone suddenly sharp. "Inspector, someone tried to steal this from Mr. Goodwin. Someone followed him, attacked him. They knew what they were after. They want this gone." Kramer frowned. "Then why give it to me?" "Because we need your badge, your access. I need you to keep it safe." Kramer studied him for a moment. "That's the first time you've ever admitted needing me." Wolfe exhaled. "It won't happen again." Kramer smirked, but it didn't last. He slid the ledger into his coat, buttoned the front, and straightened. "If this goes public," he said, "we'll be knee-deep in scandal." Wolfe nodded. "Then don't let it go public." Kramer looked at me. "If I find out you two are holding anything back, you'll shout," I said, "and stomp, and make threats." He stepped toward me. I didn't flinch. "Don't test me, Goodwin." "I never do." He grunted and turned back to Wolfe. "Whatever game you're playing, end it fast. I don't care about secrets. I care about bodies." Wolfe said nothing.
Kramer retrieved his hat from the floor, dusted it off with the back of his hand, and set it on his head.
At the door he paused.
"I'll be back. With questions, you'd better have answers."
Then he was gone. Fritz didn't announce his departure. He didn't need to. The echo of Kramer's voice lingered long after the door had shut. Wolfe closed his eyes and reached for his beer. "He'll guard it," he said, "like a dog with a bone." I stepped to the desk, checked my notes again, and sat. "He'll read it too." "Yes." "He'll follow the initials?" "Yes." "And if he finds HR?"
Wolfe opened his eyes.
"He may not survive it." By noon, the brownstone had returned to its usual rhythm. The mail sat untouched. Fritz was boiling eggs with the care of a chemist. Camilla remained upstairs, silent behind the door of the red bedroom. Wolfe and I sat in the office. The ledger was open on the desk, carefully flattened under two brass weights. Wolfe tapped a finger on a column. "This page, Archie." I leaned in. "February 1944, RV, $2,500. Then again 3 months later, same amount. RV being Raymond Vardell. Presumably. I scanned further. Another entry, August 1945, $5,000. Same initials, same looping script. Reggie was consistent, I said. Initials first, amount second, then, occasionally, a word or two. Wolfe nodded. He turned the page. Dated April 1946. Another RV entry, but this one included a word beside it. Daisy. Wolfe spoke softly. 2 years ago. That was the month the maid died. I remembered now. Tilda mentioned it. Said Reggie was different after. Quieter. She also said Raymond insisted on handling it privately. No police. I scanned the page again. No cause of death recorded anywhere.
"No, but the ledger isn't a diary."
Still, I said, that's a large payment for a servant's death. Too large for grief, not large enough for guilt. I flipped another page. Other names repeated. CL, HR, MK, but none as consistently as RV. 5 entries in total, I said, over 2 years. Wolfe nodded again, each time following disruption. Disruption? He pointed. Look, January 45, payment. 1 week later, a notation. Visit uninvited. Someone showed up, or someone threatened to. I looked toward the safe. And the last one? Wolfe turned the final page. October 1946. RV, $3,000, no note. 3 weeks later, the entries stopped altogether. Colby knew something, I said. He always knew, but this, Wolfe tapped the column. This tells us when Raymond began to lose control. I stood, pulled my notebook from the desk drawer, and tucked it under my arm. Where are you going? Wolfe asked. To ask Raymond a few questions. Take care. I gave him a nod. I always do. Raymond Vardell's apartment was in a high-rise off Park Avenue, too new, too bright, and entirely too modern for someone his age. The doorman didn't argue when I gave my name. He buzzed the elevator, and I rode up alone.
Raymond opened the door himself. He looked tired, which was new, shirt open at the collar, tie loose, a silver tumbler in his hand.
Mr. Goodwin, he said, to what do I owe the pleasure? I'd call it a follow-up. I see.
He stepped aside.
I entered. The living room smelled faintly of gin and wax polish. A jazz record was spinning low in the background, something smooth and lazy. I waited. He gestured to the armchair. I didn't sit. I'll be brief, I said. He nodded. Your name appears several times in Reggie Colby's ledger. His grip on the tumbler didn't change, but his eyes narrowed. Ledger? A book. Payments, notes.
Is that so?
5 payments over 2 years, all sizable, all following incidents. Which incidents? The death of your maid, for one. He walked to the bar, poured another drink, didn't offer me one. She fell, he said, on the stairs, broke her neck. No autopsy? She was young, fit, no history. We were told it wasn't necessary. You were told, or you told them. He turned. You're implying something? I'm asking. He paused, then sipped. Colby kept records. That was his business. He liked lists. Did he threaten to share those lists?
No.
Did Lionel know? About the ledger? Yes. Raymond walked to the window. I don't know.
But he might have. Raymond turned back.
You think I killed Lionel? I think you were afraid of him. Raymond's voice dropped half an octave.
You don't know what you're talking about.
You hated him. He smiled.
Hate is too small a word.
Raymond moved from the window and lowered himself into the chair across from me. He set his drink down on the glass table with the precision of a man accustomed to being obeyed. I didn't hate Lionel because he was cruel, he said, though he was, or because he drank, though he did. I hated him because he was stupid and proud and had no idea how dangerous that is. I said nothing. Raymond went on more softly now. He was going to ruin everything. The name, the estate, the little bit of dignity my brother left behind when he died. Lionel had debts. Women. Schemes. And you? I covered what I could, paid where I must, including to Reggie. To keep him quiet? No, to keep him safe. From Lionel. I tilted my head. You're saying Lionel threatened Reggie? He accused him of blackmail. He didn't understand the man. Reggie was loyal to my brother, not to me, not to the money. But he kept a record. Raymond looked down at his glass. And someone found it, I said. He looked up. Yes.
And Lionel's death?
Raymond's voice dropped to a whisper. I didn't do it. But you're not surprised.
He didn't answer. I watched him for a moment longer, then stood. I'd like Camilla's thoughts on this.
She won't defend me.
Maybe not, but she remembers.
Raymond stood as well. She remembers too much. She always has. Camilla was in the front room of the brownstone when I returned. She sat near the fire, a book on her lap, unopened. When I stepped in, she didn't smile. Raymond? He's sweating, I said. She nodded. Did he tell you about Daisy? I sat. No, he just said she fell. She didn't fall. She turned to the fire. I saw the bruises on her arms, wrists. She was terrified. 2 days before she died, she asked Reggie for help.
Help with what? I don't know, but I think Raymond knew something.
I leaned forward. Why didn't you say that before? She didn't look at me, because I thought maybe Reggie had exaggerated, and because my uncle had already arranged the funeral before I could ask.
And Lionel?
She turned now. Her eyes were tired but steady. Lionel hated Reggie, always called him a snake, said he was keeping secrets. Was he?
She nodded. Yes, for my father. Did Lionel know about the ledger?
No, but he suspected something. I saw him once trying to search Reggie's room. And Raymond? He already knew. Reggie trusted him, once, years ago, until Daisy. I stood again.
Then that payment was hush money.
Yes.
To whom?
I don't know. Or maybe a bribe.
Camilla said nothing.
I stepped to the door. We're running out of initials, I said, and time. She looked up. Who's next?
I didn't answer, because I didn't know.
The office was still when I entered, early light creeping through the Venetian slats like a spy who didn't belong. Wolfe hadn't emerged yet. Fritz had gone to the market. Camilla remained tucked away in the upstairs guest room, curtains drawn. I took the opportunity to re-examine the ledger. Kramer had returned it the night before, frustrated and no closer to naming a suspect. He'd read it twice, then muttered something about ghosts in red ink and stormed out. Wolfe hadn't looked at it since, but I had a hunch. Something about the way the entries felt. Not what they said, how they looked. I retrieved my magnifier from the desk drawer, turned on the green-shaded lamp and opened to the first page. Dates, figures, initials, ink. The left column entries are 1935 through early 42, had a uniform colour, a muted sepia tone, slight feathering on the loops, that made sense. Iron gall ink or something like it, common for the time. But the entries from 1945 onward, they were a darker black, shinier in the right light. The lines had a drag to them, uneven pressure, and worst of all, the ink didn't feather. It bled. I touched the corner of one initial lightly with a gloved fingertip. It smudged. Old ink doesn't smudge. I opened the desk drawer again and pulled out a small blotting sheet Wolfe kept for letters. I pressed it flat against the bottom right of the page and held it there. When I lifted it, faint mirror images of two initials came with it, RV. I sat back. Hell. Half this book had been written recently, very recently. I heard the stairs creak. Wolfe entered, already buttoned in his vest, eyes narrowed. "You're up early," he said. "I found something." He crossed to the desk and looked down at the open ledger. I handed him the blotter. He examined it, turned it in the light, then looked at the page. "This was added," he said. "Months after Colby died, maybe?" "No," he reached for his reading glasses. "This ink is less than 3 days old." I stared at him. 3 days? He nodded. "Perhaps 4, but not older. The composition is modern. The pen was a fountain type, possibly flexible nibbed, but certainly not pre-war. That means the original entries were tampered with or replaced entirely. So we don't have a ledger." Wolfe closed the book. We have a prop.
He returned to his chair.
I stayed standing. Who faked it? That, Wolfe said, is now the only question that matters. Fritz returned just before lunch with a small sack of lemons and a rolled newspaper. He set the bag down and began arranging silverware for Wolfe's meal when I stopped him in the hall. "Fritz," I said, "when Miss Vardell came here the first time, was she carrying anything?"
He frowned. "Yes, a small case."
"What kind?"
"Leather, dark brown, about the size of a vanity kit."
I nodded. "Did she leave with it?" "I believe so, though I did not see it again."
"Did Wolfe?"
"I cannot say. Did she ever leave it unattended?" "Only briefly, when she went upstairs to the guest washroom." "And where was the case?" "In the vestibule, on the bench." "How long?"
"Less than 10 minutes.
I looked at the ledger in my hand. She had brought it with her. Not the original, a copy. I headed for the office.
Wolfe looked up.
"She brought this," I said.
"Of course."
"You knew?" "I suspected. Why didn't you say so?"
"Because I wanted you to."
He lifted his glass. "Well done."
Wolfe didn't seem pleased, but he wasn't annoyed either.
He closed the ledger slowly with both hands and set it on the desk between us like a piece of evidence that had outlived its value. "She brought a forgery," I said. "Yes." "And you let Kramer take it?" "I did." I blinked. "You sent Kramer off with a fake ledger?" Wolfe laced his fingers together and stared at me over the rim of his glasses. "Would you rather I handed him nothing?" I exhaled through my nose and sat back. "So what's the play?" "The forgery serves a purpose. Whoever crafted it wanted a story told, a specific story, one that steered suspicion toward Raymond. Because of the repeated payments, yes, and the reference to Daisy. Convenient, inflammatory, too tidy. So what now?" Wolfe tapped his fingertips together. "Now we find the original. And Camilla? She must be questioned gently. She's not going to confess."
"No, but she may misstep."
I stood. "I'll handle it." Wolfe nodded once. I found her in the upstairs hall, near the window seat, staring out at the street below. She wore a pale blue dress and held a handkerchief in one hand, though it was dry. She turned at my approach. "Mr. Goodwin." "I have a few things to clear up," I said. She nodded. "Of course." We moved into the guest room. She sat on the edge of the bed. I remained near the door. "When you came here the first time," I began, "you brought a case." She froze. "Yes," she said, "my father's letters and some notes Reggie had left behind." "Is that what you told Wolfe?" She hesitated. "Yes."
I nodded. "Was the ledger in that case?"
She didn't answer. I stepped closer.
"You can tell me, or you can tell Kramer."
"I didn't lie," she said. "I just didn't say everything."
"That's called omission."
"I didn't forge it." "Then who did?"
"I don't know."
I paused. "Do you have the original?" She looked away. "I want the truth, Miss Vardell." She stood. "I didn't kill Lionel or Reggie, but I was trying to protect someone."
"Raymond?"
She shook her head. "My father."
I frowned. "He's dead."
"I was protecting what's left of him."
She crossed to the closet, knelt, and opened a small leather trunk. From beneath a stack of scarves, she lifted a book. Crimson, leather-bound, identical to the one in the office.
She held it out to me. I was afraid of what it would show, so I made a copy. Who helped?
A man Reggie trusted. He used to work with him, a notary. Quiet, careful. I took the book and flipped through. This one was older. The ink smelled right, the edges worn.
"This is the real one," she nodded. "Why give us the fake?"
"Because if someone came looking, I didn't want the real one in your safe. I wanted it with me." I stepped back.
"You were trying to protect your family's name." She nodded again. "And now?"
She looked at the floor.
"Now I want to know who killed them." It started with a taxi, not a yellow one, but the private kind. Green roof, clean hubcaps, a driver who didn't need to be hailed. It pulled up in front of the brownstone, just after 10. Camilla stepped out with her coat buttoned and gloves tight. She didn't say goodbye to Fritz. She didn't look back. I watched from the upstairs window. 3 minutes later, I was in another cab. She didn't give an address. She murmured something through the driver's window, and they pulled away fast. My man was better, a former crook with a soft heart and a sharp eye.
Keep her close, I said, but don't crowd her. We slid through Midtown. She led us west, then south, past 28th, past 23rd. The cab stopped on a quiet block in Chelsea, just off 8th Avenue.
She got out, checked her surroundings like a stage actress waiting for her cue, then stepped into a modest hotel with brass handles on the door and a faded green awning. The sign read, Hotel Rutherford, weekly and discreet. I gave her a full minute, then I paid my driver and went in. The lobby was quiet. A fan turned lazily on the ceiling. The man at the desk wore a green visor and smelled faintly of fried onions. He didn't look up until I coughed. Looking for a guest, I said. He squinted.
Name? Camilla Vardell. He frowned. I ain't got one. I pulled a 5 from my wallet, laid it on the counter.
He slid it away without blinking. She came in 10 minutes ago, he said. Signed under Mrs. Harriman. Room 202. Thanks.
He nodded and returned to his crossword.
The stairs creaked. The hallway smelled like varnish and mothballs. I knocked twice. Camilla answered the door, still wearing her gloves. Her face dropped when she saw me. How? I followed you. She stepped back automatically. I entered. The room was small, neat, no suitcases. One bed, a lamp, a writing desk with a single sheet of stationery lying blank beside an uncapped pen. I shut the door behind me. You're not Mrs. Harriman. No. This isn't a family errand. No.
You planning to disappear? She sat on the edge of the bed.
No. I stayed standing.
Start talking.
She looked down at her gloves, peeled them off, one finger at a time. I didn't know what else to do. I waited. I found the real ledger after Reggie died in the bottom of his trunk, hidden under the lining. I didn't read all of it at first. Just skimmed. There were names, codes, payments. I panicked. You made the copy. She nodded. I thought if Raymond was involved in anything, if he hurt Reggie or Daisy or anyone, it might be in there, but it wasn't.
But you forged entries anyway.
Yes. To frame him.
She didn't speak. To make it look like he killed Lionel.
She swallowed.
I didn't poison Lionel. I watched her.
I swear to you, Archie, I was trying to stop him from taking everything, the house, the estate, my father's name.
I stepped closer. You doctored evidence in a murder investigation. You lied to Wolfe, to Kramer. I didn't kill anyone.
But you knew Lionel was dangerous. Yes. And you wanted him out of the way. Her voice dropped.
I wanted him stopped, not dead.
I turned toward the desk, the blank paper, the open pen. You were writing a confession. She said nothing, and I looked at her again. I don't know if I believe you. Wolfe will. Not completely. She folded her gloves.
Then what?
You come back, you explain it all. He'll hate me.
No, he'll weigh you. And you? I gave her the answer she didn't want.
I don't know yet. The kitchen was quiet, the scent of time lingering like memory. Wolfe was in the plant rooms, locked away with his orchids. I was in the front office, sorting the useless from the less useless in the pile of yesterday's notes. Then Fritz appeared, not with beer, not with biscuits, but with a strange look in his eyes and something thick in his hand. It was a cookbook, old, burgundy-bound, cracked at the spine. I found this behind the wine rack, he said. You reorganizing the cellar? No, the library. I raised an eyebrow. I do not reorganize, I maintain. This was out of place.
He laid it on the desk and I opened it.
The pages had been hollowed clean through, a perfect rectangle cut from the center like a magician's trick box. And inside, folded once with deliberate care, was a single sheet of parchment paper, brittle, aged, and unmistakably real. I unfolded it.
There was handwriting, sharp, thin strokes, signed at the bottom, Reggie Colby.
Wolfe entered just then, brushing his vest, still fragrant from orchid pollen. Fritz handed him the note without a word. Wolfe read aloud. "Mr. Wolfe, if anything happens to me, know that I did not misplace the ledger. I've hidden it where I once waited for Camilla's father to die. It is behind his eyes. R.C., October 11th. Wolfe folded the note carefully and set it beside the cookbook. I leaned forward. Where I once waited for Camilla's father to die. Yes, Wolfe said softly, not where I hid his secrets or where we kept accounts. The phrase implies familiarity, intimacy, and pain. And then, behind his eyes, a location, metaphorical or literal. I stood. I'm going back to the Vardell house. Wolfe nodded. Take care. This time the trail is warm. The Vardell house was darker than I remembered. The lamps had been dimmed, dust had begun to settle. The hallway smelled of paper and lost conversation. Tilda answered the door. She gave me a small nod and opened the way. Is Miss Vardell in? She's resting.
And Mr. Raymond?
Gone, left 2 nights ago, didn't say where. I handed her my coat.
I'll be in the study.
It took me 10 minutes to find it. The oil portrait of Augustus Vardell hung in the corner of the study, a grim-faced man with sunken cheeks and eyes like melted coins. He'd ruled the family once. Wolfe said he died years ago after a long illness and a slow decline. I stood in front of the painting. Behind his eyes, I reached up and touched the left eye on the canvas. Just paint, the frame. Wood. Heavier than it looked. I stepped onto the side table and lifted the whole painting from the wall. The nails gave way with a reluctant groan. Behind it, wallpaper, faded green with gold flourishes.
But in the upper right quadrant I saw something else, a faint rectangular outline, different texture, duller. A panel.
I tapped it, hollow. I pulled my pocket knife, slid it beneath the edge and pried gently. The panel opened on a hinge. A small recess lay beyond. Inside, wrapped in linen and tied with string, was a book. Crimson. Leather. A familiar spine. But this one was heavier. Real. I held it for a moment in both hands like a relic.
Then I tucked it inside my coat and closed the panel.
Possibly flexible-nibbed, but certainly not pre-war. That means the original entries were tampered with or replaced entirely. So we don't have a ledger.
Wolfe closed the book.
We have a prop.
He returned to his chair.
I stayed standing. Who faked it? That, Wolfe said, is now the only question that matters. Fritz returned just before lunch with a small sack of lemons and a rolled newspaper. He set the bag down and began arranging silverware for Wolfe's meal when I stopped him in the hall. Fritz, I said, when Miss Vardell came here the first time, was she carrying anything?
He frowned. Yes, a small case.
What kind?
Leather, dark brown, about the size of a vanity kit.
I nodded. Did she leave with it? I believe so, though I did not see it again.
Did Wolfe?
I cannot say. Did she ever leave it unattended? Only briefly, when she went upstairs to the guest washroom. And where was the case? In the vestibule, on the bench. How long?
Less than 10 minutes.
I looked at the ledger in my hand. She had brought it with her. Not the original, a copy. I headed for the office.
Wolfe looked up.
She brought this, I said.
Of course.
You knew? I suspected. Why didn't you say so?
Because I wanted you to.
He lifted his glass. Well done.
Wolfe didn't seem pleased, but he wasn't annoyed either.
He closed the ledger slowly with both hands and set it on the desk between us, like a piece of evidence that had outlived its value. She brought a forgery, I said. Yes. And you let Kramer take it? I did. I blinked. You sent Kramer off with a fake ledger? Wolfe laced his fingers together and stared at me over the rim of his glasses. Would you rather I handed him nothing? I exhaled through my nose and sat back. So what's the play? The forgery serves a purpose. Whoever crafted it wanted a story told, a specific story, one that steered suspicion toward Raymond. Because of the repeated payments, yes, and the reference to Daisy. Convenient, inflammatory, too tidy. So what now? Wolfe tapped his fingertips together. Now we find the original. And Camilla? She must be questioned gently. She's not going to confess.
No, but she may misstep.
I stood. I'll handle it. Wolfe nodded once. I found her in the upstairs hall, near the window seat, staring out at the street below. She wore a pale blue dress and held a handkerchief in one hand, though it was dry. She turned at my approach. "Mr. Goodwin, I have a few things to clear up," I said. She nodded. "Of course." We moved into the guest room. She sat on the edge of the bed. I remained near the door. "When you came here the first time," I began, "you brought a case." She froze. "Yes," she said, "my father's letters and some notes Reggie had left behind." "Is that what you told Wolfe?" She hesitated. "Yes."
I nodded. Was the ledger in that case?
She didn't answer. I stepped closer.
You can tell me, or you can tell Kramer.
"I didn't lie," she said. "I just didn't say everything."
That's called omission.
"I didn't forge it." "Then who did?"
I don't know.
I paused. "Do you have the original?" She looked away. "I want the truth, Miss Vardell." She stood. "I didn't kill Lionel or Reggie, but I was trying to protect someone."
Raymond?
She shook her head. "My father."
I frowned. He's dead.
"I was protecting what's left of him."
She crossed to the closet, knelt, and opened a small leather trunk. From beneath a stack of scarves, she lifted a book. Crimson, leather-bound, identical to the one in the office.
She held it out to me. I was afraid of what it would show, so I made a copy. Who helped?
A man Reggie trusted. He used to work with him. A notary. Quiet. Careful. I took the book and flipped through. This one was older. The ink smelled right. The edges worn.
"This is the real one," she nodded. "Why give us the fake?"
Because if someone came looking, I didn't want the real one in your safe. I wanted it with me. I stepped back.
"You were trying to protect your family's name." She nodded again. "And now?"
She looked at the floor.
"Now I want to know who killed them." It started with a taxi, not a yellow one, but the private kind. Green roof, clean hubcaps, a driver who didn't need to be hailed. It pulled up in front of the brownstone just after 10. Camilla stepped out with her coat buttoned and gloves tight. She didn't say goodbye to Fritz. She didn't look back. I watched from the upstairs window. 3 minutes later, I was in another cab. She didn't give an address. She murmured something through the driver's window, and they pulled away fast. My man was better, a former crook with a soft heart and a sharp eye.
Keep her close, I said, but don't crowd her. We slid through Midtown. She led us west, then south, past 28th, past 23rd. The cab stopped on a quiet block in Chelsea, just off 8th Avenue. She got out, checked her surroundings like a stage actress waiting for her cue, then stepped into a modest hotel with brass handles on the door and a faded green awning. The sign read, "Hotel Rutherford, weekly and discreet." I gave her a full minute, then I paid my driver and went in. The lobby was quiet. A fan turned lazily on the ceiling. The man at the desk wore a green visor and smelled faintly of fried onions. He didn't look up until I coughed. "Looking for a guest," I said. He squinted. "Name?" "Camilla Vardell." He frowned. "I ain't got one." I pulled a 5 from my wallet, laid it on the counter. He slid it away without blinking. "She came in 10 minutes ago," he said. "Signed under Mrs. Harriman. Room 202. "Thanks." He nodded and returned to his crossword. The stairs creaked. The hallway smelled like varnish and mothballs. I knocked twice. Camilla answered the door, still wearing her gloves. Her face dropped when she saw me. "How—" "I followed you." She stepped back automatically.
I entered. The room was small, neat, no suitcases, one bed, a lamp, a writing desk with a single sheet of stationery lying blank beside an uncapped pen. I shut the door behind me. You're not Mrs. Harriman. No, this isn't a family errand. No.
You planning to disappear? She sat on the edge of the bed.
No. I stayed standing.
Start talking.
She looked down at her gloves, peeled them off, one finger at a time. I didn't know what else to do. I waited. I found the real ledger after Reggie died in the bottom of his trunk, hidden under the lining. I didn't read all of it at first. Just skimmed. There were names, codes, payments. I panicked. You made the copy. She nodded. I thought if Raymond was involved in anything, if he hurt Reggie or Daisy or anyone, it might be in there, but it wasn't.
But you forged entries anyway.
Yes. To frame him.
She didn't speak. To make it look like he killed Lionel.
She swallowed.
I didn't poison Lionel. I watched her.
I swear to you, Archie, I was trying to stop him from taking everything, the house, the estate, my father's name.
I stepped closer. You doctored evidence in a murder investigation. You lied to Wolfe, to Kramer. I didn't kill anyone.
But you knew Lionel was dangerous. Yes. And you wanted him out of the way. Her voice dropped.
I wanted him stopped, not dead.
I turned toward the desk, the blank paper, the open pen. You were writing a confession. She said nothing, and I looked at her again. I don't know if I believe you. Wolfe will. Not completely. She folded her gloves.
Then what?
You come back, you explain it all. He'll hate me.
No, he'll weigh you. And you? I gave her the answer she didn't want.
I don't know yet. The kitchen was quiet, the scent of time lingering like memory. Wolfe was in the plant rooms, locked away with his orchids. I was in the front office, sorting the useless from the less useless in the pile of yesterday's notes. Then Fritz appeared, not with beer, not with biscuits, but with a strange look in his eyes and something thick in his hand. It was a cookbook, old, burgundy-bound, cracked at the spine. I found this behind the wine rack, he said. You reorganizing the cellar? No, the library. I raised an eyebrow. I do not reorganize, I maintain. This was out of place.
He laid it on the desk and I opened it.
The pages had been hollowed clean through, a perfect rectangle cut from the center like a magician's trick box. And inside, folded once with deliberate care, was a single sheet of parchment paper, brittle, aged, and unmistakably real. I unfolded it.
There was handwriting, sharp, thin strokes. Signed at the bottom, Reggie Colby.
Wolfe entered just then, brushing his vest, still fragrant from orchid pollen. Fritz handed him the note without a word. Wolfe read aloud. Mr. Wolfe, if anything happens to me, know that I did not misplace the ledger. I've hidden it where I once waited for Camilla's father to die. It is behind his eyes. R.C., October 11th. Wolfe folded the note carefully and set it beside the cookbook. I leaned forward. Where I once waited for Camilla's father to die. Yes, Wolfe said softly. Not where I hid his secrets or where we kept accounts. The phrase implies familiarity, intimacy, and pain. And then, behind his eyes, a location, metaphorical or literal. I stood. I'm going back to the Vardell house. Wolfe nodded. Take care. This time the trail is warm. The Vardell house was darker than I remembered. The lamps had been dimmed. Dust had begun to settle. The hallway smelled of paper and lost conversation. Tilda answered the door. She gave me a small nod and opened the way. Is Miss Vardell in? She's resting.
And Mr. Raymond?
Gone. Left 2 nights ago. Didn't say where. I handed her my coat.
I'll be in the study.
It took me 10 minutes to find it. The oil portrait of Augustus Vardell hung in the corner of the study, a grim-faced man with sunken cheeks and eyes like melted coins. He'd ruled the family once. Wolfe said he died years ago after a long illness and a slow decline. I stood in front of the painting. Behind his eyes, I reached up and touched the left eye on the canvas. Just paint, the frame. Wood. Heavier than it looked. I stepped onto the side table and lifted the whole painting from the wall. The nails gave way with a reluctant groan. Behind it, wallpaper, faded green with gold flourishes.
But in the upper right quadrant I saw something else, a faint rectangular outline, different texture, duller. A panel.
I tapped it, hollow. I pulled my pocket knife, slid it beneath the edge, and pried gently. The panel opened on a hinge. A small recess lay beyond. Inside, wrapped in linen and tied with string, was a book. Crimson. Leather. A familiar spine. But this one was heavier. Real. I held it for a moment in both hands like a relic.
Then I tucked it inside my coat and closed the panel.
Wolfe waited behind his desk. He did not stand. The yellow chair had never looked more like a throne. Raymond entered with a half smirk and a hard chin, the kind of expression you wear when the gallows is near and you think the rope might still be bluffing. "I don't see the point of this," he said. "You will," Wolfe replied. Kramer shut the door behind him. Archie leaned near the fireplace, arms folded. I stood beside the safe real ledger. Inside, forgery burned the night before. "I assume," Raymond said, "that this is about my alleged participation in Reggie's demise." "Alleged," Wolfe repeated. "Let us test that word." Raymond took the red chair opposite. No invitation had been offered. None was needed. Wolfe reached into a side drawer and withdrew an envelope. Parchment, cream-toned, thick. He opened it and slid out a single sheet, folded twice. "This," he said, "is a note written by Mr. Colby the night before he died. You will notice the handwriting matches the one you've seen." He passed it to Kramer, who nodded after a scan. "You've read it," Wolfe continued, "but what you have not understood, what even I did not understand until yesterday, is the ink."
Raymond gave a short laugh.
"You expect to hang a man on ink?"
"Yes," Wolfe said calmly.
He gestured to Archie, who stepped forward and laid a small case on the desk. Inside, 3 pens, 2 standard Watermans, 1 gold-nibbed, engraved, with a green marbled body. Raymond froze.
"That," Wolfe said, "is your pen, from your office. A gift from Mr. Harrigan at Harrigan and Leeds. The nib is custom ground. The ink, likewise, is custom. A blend called Verdigris 204, manufactured only for your firm by a specialist in Pennsylvania. We contacted them. The ink is not commercially available."
Raymond opened his mouth. "Don't," Wolfe said, and he turned back to the envelope.
"The note from Reggie Colby was written in Verdigris 204.
Raymond stood. "That proves nothing. It's my stationery. Of course the ink would match."
"It wasn't your stationery," Wolfe said. "It was Reggie's. He used your pen, or more likely, you used it, to forge a dying message, to suggest that Reggie had left you out, that he had acted alone." "I never—"
"You did." Wolfe's voice cut the air. "You forged the note to muddy the trail, but in your arrogance, you used the very ink that marked your hand." Raymond looked to Kramer. "This is absurd." Kramer shook his head. "No, this is airtight." Raymond's voice rose. "She forged the ledger." Wolfe nodded. "Yes, and we knew it. She was protecting a name. You were erasing lives. You're framing me."
"No," Wolfe said. "You framed yourself with every stroke of that pen."
Kramer stepped forward. "Raymond Vardell, you're under arrest for the murders of Lionel Vardell and Reginald Colby and the unlawful concealment of the death of Daisy Barnes." Raymond didn't resist. This time the cuffs clicked, and the gallows no longer looked so far. Fritz opened the door for them. The sound of the lock sliding shut behind Raymond felt like punctuation. Inside, the silence returned. Camilla sat in the front room, still as porcelain. Her coat was folded beside her. A scarf hung from her fingers. I approached. "It's done," I said, and she nodded. Am I free to go?" "Yes." She stood slowly. I wanted to believe he wouldn't do it, that if he had, I would know, that somehow I'd feel it. You believed in the better part of him? I believed in a lie. I opened the door. She stepped out into the dusk. Halfway down the steps, she paused. "I owe you," she said. I didn't answer. She looked back at the brownstone.
"And him?" "He believes you're clever." Her mouth lifted slightly.
"And dangerous."
The smile fell.
"He's right." She turned and walked into the fog.
I stood on the stoop for a while, watching her figure fade into the lamplight and steam. No cab, no umbrella. She moved like someone not quite sure whether she was escaping or simply done being watched.
When I returned inside, the door shut soft behind me. The brownstone held its quiet. Wolfe was still in the office. His chair hadn't moved, nor had he. The desk was cleared now. The green lamp was on, casting a theatrical glow over the blotter and the thin line of condensation on his beer glass. I entered. "She's gone," I said. He nodded once.
"You let her walk," I added.
"She broke no law," Wolfe replied, "only a trust. And the forgery was never meant to deceive justice, only me." He closed his eyes. "She is clever far more than she appears, and dangerous, because her convictions are not anchored by truth, but by need. Then why let her go? She did not poison, she did not profit. She lied to protect something or someone, and stopped once it endangered others."
I sat across from him, arms loose, hands open. "I liked her," I said.
Wolfe didn't answer.
After a moment I added, "Still do."
He nodded, barely perceptible. "She did what she believed was right, and she might do it again." "Yes," he said.